to Washington so we can take a look at these live pictures of the March for Life. Now, that is the annual rally in the Capitol by opponents of abortion. Now, tomorrow, Saturday, there is another march scheduled. You could say it's representing the other side of the political spectrum. It's the Women's March that was initiated 2 years ago in protest over the election of Donald Trump and his policies. But that march has since become riven by accusations of anti-Semitism, or at least the toleration of anti-Semitism directed against some of its leaders. Well, joining us is our international affairs correspondent, Bianca Zanini. Bianca, just set the stage for us. What is this controversy?
Right. Before that, I just want to remind you, 2 years ago when this first started, there was this big sense of unity. It was never without controversy, but still, it was women coming together. It was the largest single-day protest in U.S. history. We saw it across the globe. This year, again, we're going to see marches in 30 countries, but it is much smaller exactly because of this controversy you're talking about, the anti-Semitism thing. It started already back in 2016 in November, when the co-chairs, that's Tamika Mallory and Perez, apparently said, and I'm going to read here, Jewish people bear a special collective responsibilities as exploiters of black and brown people. So this started something, and then in February of last year, Mallory attended an event with the Nation of Islam leader Louis Farrakhan, and he had some inflammatory speeches, and since then she hasn't really distanced himself enough, that's what critics are saying, from him. She was on The View this Monday.
Well, let's go that clip, yes.
Yes, all right. Well, we heard her not distancing herself enough, at least. So that's really what's been setting the scene. We're seeing sister organizations backing out. We're seeing the Democratic National Committee removing themselves from the list of donors. And right now, it's really the big question. Can women stand united on such a big issue? And we also know that here in Israel, they've had the Women's March before. The organizers have decided, because of this, not to have it this year.
Canceled in Israel, but not in the U.S. And joining us from New York now is Rabbi Lauren Grabelle Herrmann. She's the rabbi at SAG, the Society for the Advancement of Judaism in New York. And she is one of 9 rabbis who this week issued a public letter encouraging Jewish participation in the march. That is after holding discussions with Tamika Mallory and Linda Sarsour. So, Rabbi, let me ask you, why did you decide to put out this letter this week encouraging Jewish participation?
Hi, thank you for having me. Let me just begin by saying that movement work is messy and that conversations and relationships matter. Before I had the opportunity to be at this meeting, I too was feeling a lot of confusion and stress. I feel absolutely the urgency of fighting white supremacy and misogyny in this country, and also am committed to the fight for against anti-Semitism. When we had the opportunity to sit down with Linda and Tamika, as well as a few old-time movement leaders, and as well as some prominent African-American clergy, we got into the conversations in a very deep and hard and painful way. We were honest, and we struggled, and we listened, and we talked. And that conversation gave me and the 8 of my colleagues, and a few that have come along since in their own ways, the confidence to say that we are going to stay in this relationship well past the march, and that we believe there is power in the unity and this vision of an intersectional, multi-faith, multiracial movement. It's hard, it's messy, but we're going to stay in that relationship, and we're going to move forward together, because we have more to risk by walking away than by staying together.
Rabbi Herrmann, I'd like us to take a look at this clip that my colleague Bianca mentioned. This was Tamika Mallory on the ABC TV show The View. Let's take a listen.
Don't agree with many of Minister Farrakhan's statements.
Specifically about Jewish people.
As I said, I don't agree with many of Minister Farrakhan's statements.
Do you condemn them?
I don't agree with these statements. At the end of the day...
You won't condemn it.
No. To be very clear, it's not my language.
She said she didn't agree, but she did not condemn Reverend Farrakhan's statements. And here's what the very socially active comedian Sarah Silverman had to say after that. I cannot imagine having such mild feelings over such a furious hatred of an entire people. He, Farrakhan, calls us termites I'm heartbroken, but I'm going to stay hopeful because I don't want to give up on Tamika. Oh, well, is that how she feels about Louis Farrakhan? Oh, this life. Rabbi, I have to ask you, though, Sarah Silverman decided not to take part or participate in this march. Why not choose that option? Leave the option open for future dialogue with Tamika Mallory and some of the other people connected, but to say we do have to draw a line, at least on this year's event.
So I want to be clear that I condemn Louis Farrakhan, obviously, and think his views are abhorrent and horribly problematic and need to be addressed, first and foremost. But secondly, I want to say that the Women's March has unequivocally denounced Farrakhan. They've issued several statements saying that they do not support his views. They have issued unity principles that are from the beginning and then were amended along the way that include Jewish women and anti-Semitism in this fight. So I believe wholeheartedly that the unity principles stand, that the Women's March leaders denounce Farrakhan. The Women's March denounces Farrakhan. As for Tamika, I can't speak for her personally, but when I was in a group with her, I heard her listening to us and to be in conversation with us. I can't walk another person's shoes. The Women's March is bigger than one person. This is about the possibility of a movement for good in the world and for transformation. We just have too much at stake to get caught up in and not see the bigger picture. As well, people saw The View, but fewer people saw that the very next day, Tamika went on a program and was speaking to an African-American counterpart on a program called The Breakfast Club on a radio show. And on that show, she spoke brilliantly about the way that African-Americans and Jews have been divided in this country and the way that anti-Semitism works and the fact that and she even said, we, especially as an African-American community, need to pay attention to anti-Semitism. I think she was cornered in a very particular situation, but if you can find that clip, I strongly encourage everyone to find Tamika's speech on the...
I understand that, Rabbi, but
I just would encourage everyone to find this other speech in which she spoke.
Okay,
yeah.
But there is something to be said for consistency. I want to give Bianca a chance to join into the conversation.
Well, I really think that this whole debate highlights the fact that women's equality is really connected to all sorts of other rights issues and all sorts of other minority groups, right? We've got Latinas, we've got black women, we've got Jewish women, we've got different classes, different political points of view. You mentioned this yourself earlier. Are you pro-life? Are you not? But at the end of the day, there are some things that as women we can stand together for. It's about going against misogyny, fighting for equal pay, fighting to end sexual harassment, to end rape, and to change something for equality of women. And we have to realize that there's a balance within this where we might understand that we have different and sometimes opposing battles within this bigger battle, but that perhaps, and I'm not going to speak for the rabbis here, but perhaps there is a point in standing united as women even when we go through these fights and differences that we have.
But that's a fair comment, but the question again, Rabbi, is why this particular march? Why not organize a parallel march? Why not try to replace the leadership if you have one or two problematic personalities here and then move forward?
I want to respond to what I believe it was Bianca just said when you said that we have larger fights, but I also want to acknowledge that white supremacy is one of those fights, that anti-Semitism and racism are in America are both tied together and a part of a larger phenomenon of white supremacy. And that actually we can do more good by coming together and understanding each other, even in these difficult conversations. The conversation we had as the rabbis and with Tamika and Linda was not easy, but by coming together, we can learn how to fight together against and to see how white supremacy is intending to divide us so that we don't confront it. We need to fight together, to not just on women's issues, but on issues that are good for all of humanity.
Rabbi, isn't anti-Semitism an issue, a scourge that also transcends color? Wouldn't that also obligate confronting anti-Semitism, even when it may happen, for example, in the African-American community?
Absolutely. But I want to encourage everyone to go to the Women's March website and to check out right on their front page their mission and their unity principles. Their unity principles make it very clear that this fight is also a fight against anti-Semitism. And Jews are in this fight. They're named explicitly. I want to also mention that a lot of work has been done that is not highlighted because, of course, the controversy is what people want to lead with. The Women's March has recently appointed 3 new members to their steering committee who are Jews. And these are 3 fantastic women who I deeply respect: April Baskin, Yavila McCoy, and Abby Stein. These women are going to be able to articulate, again, even more strongly, the Jewish women's perspective on this larger fight and be in the conversation and be in the room and be able to help move this movement along.
Rabbi,
I don't believe
Rabbi,
it's
I
helpful
have
for
to ask
anyone
you,
for us to be divided.
We had one of Abby Stein was actually on one of our programs today, but she and the other 2 individuals were mentioned. They were added quite late. They were put on a steering committee. They were not made one of the directors. There were articles also reporting some objections against some of the original Jewish directors of the march made by, for example, Tamika and Linda Sarsour.
The early allegations have been consistently denied, and I can't speak to that because that is not something that I was present for, in the room for. So I think it's more important. I want to also say that along those lines, from the very beginning of the Women's March, back in 2016, when all of this was beginning, national Jewish organizations were consulted when coming up with the unity principles. Jewish women were named when many women who were mentioned as role models in this fight were mentioned, including Gloria Steinem, Bella Abzug, like several different Jewish women. That was from day one. That was not something that was added in the 11th hour. So from the very beginning, there were Jewish partners that were working on the Women's March. And in some ways, the same controversy is being recycled and talked about over and over again. We need to move on. Tamika is in conversation, is in dialogue. We are building relationships. We have so much more work we can do together than apart, and we have
Rabbi,
to stay in the fight.
You make a point
this
about
work is messy, but we're better together.
I understand that.